All right, we're recording. This is Robert from Existence First, and I'm here with
Kyra Carlin from Mind Coaching.
Yeah, so we are both mind coaches. We met at a self-development conference, the Grant Cardone 10X Growth Con, and this is yet another of our many gatherings of the minds, so to speak, two mind coaches. We have a lot of overlap in our thinking, and we like the same topics, so we decided to get together again and have a bit of a discussion. So that being said, Kyra, I think you had a topic to start us off with for today.
Definitely did. So one thing that kills me is, and I hear it a lot, like ever since I've gotten into self-help, all I hear about, it seems it pops up everywhere, and it's like you have to choose one thing, you guys. And even from like some of the biggest mind coaches I know, I'm not going to name any because I truthfully don't remember the names, and I don't want to hold anyone responsible if they didn't say it, but they're always saying choose one thing to focus on, like one thing, and I don't like that because I can't focus on one thing. I personally don't like it. I mean, what do you think, Robert?
First thing that comes to mind is the book, The One Thing, by Gary Keller, I believe the founder of Keller Williams Realty. And I like the book. I don't think that I'm focusing on one thing very much these days, even though the book, well, there's a lot of value in it, which I can go into in a little bit, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind. What about you, though?
Probably. I love how you said these days I'm not focusing on one thing because I'm thinking about quarantine, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, it's quite impossible to think about one thing on quarantine, don't you think? Probably what comes to mind with me is I've tried to focus on one thing. Like I got into a business venture and it was all I focused on, and I was pretty much like repelling any real result in my business because it was the only thing I was working on. And it took me like probably about 6-7 months to actually realize that, because I kept believing in the people and trusting and thinking that, this is one thing, like eventually the results will come. And they never did. And the results kept coming, but they weren't something that I wanted. So I was like, all right, well, clearly this isn't working. And I just decided to do what I know I love to do. And that's multiple things. And as I started doing that, it got my mind off the other thing. And it allowed, like, as I was working on one thing per se, my health. I've really changed up my diet recently. And as I'm working on that, it fuels me to write a book. And then as I'm writing my book, it fuels me to focus on something else in my life. And they all fuel each other for me. One thing I prefer not to work on because for me, I feel like it repels.
I gotcha. Yeah, gosh, there's so much in there. There's so much rich content in there. I feel like, well, like one of the last things you said was that if by doing multiple things, one of them then influences the other one, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so like you can kind of like shift momentum or something like that, and then that gets into like flow of energy, because how I've been thinking about my reality lately is more so the surface, and then like the deeper layer of the energy of it, right? So for instance, it's 5 p.m. We're in California right now, and I got into the office today for my day job at like 7:30 or 7:45, super early. And so as I'm going through the day doing these different tasks, I kind of pay attention to what's the flow of the energy, right? I'll notice like right after having a face-to-face meeting with someone and we discuss a project, right after that is kind of like this window of like extreme motivation to take action on some of the items that were discussed in the meeting, right? Now, the mistake I see a lot of colleagues making, which is not entirely their fault, it's in part due to the structure uh, of the workplace and busyness, is putting meetings back to back. And I think that that's a problem because you finish one meeting and you're ready to take action on a number of items that were discussed in that meeting. But instead, you have to switch your mind completely to some other project that you're a part of, right? Some other project team that you're a part of. So all of these items get left undone. Then you switch to the other project. And then by the end of that hour, you've totally forgotten about the first project and the action items for the first project. And so that's kind of what I look at, right? And so on the surface, we have these ways to describe our experience by saying that that we dread Mondays, or that, you know, what do they call it? Case of the Mondays was the phrase in that movie, The Office Space, right? Somebody's got a case of the Mondays, meaning like you didn't want to go to work Monday morning. And that's our surface, very superficial way of understanding what's going on, is to say, oh, it's Monday morning, I have a case of the Mondays, I don't want to go to work. But what's on the deeper layer of the psychic energy? Where has the psychic energy been your entire weekend? You were probably going off on some sort of adventures or hanging out by the swimming pool or whatever, and now you have to do something very different Monday morning that you didn't think about for the last 48 hours. So it causes this entire shift onto this different other project. I don't know, I said a lot there, but let me pass it to you and see if you have any thoughts.
I definitely have something to ping back to you. I love what you were saying about like going straight into the next meeting and putting meetings back to back, because it's so true. You know, when you have the energy to, you know, write down those notes from that first meeting, I feel like it's a lot more beneficial to focus on them and then focus on the next thing, instead of, because the way that this is like a whole different focusing on one thing sort of thing, because it's focusing on one thing but focusing on that different one thing. Because if you're holding meetings back to back to back to back, that's focusing on one thing. That's focusing on your meetings, right? But if you're focusing on this one, getting that energy down, then this one, getting that energy down, then this one, getting that energy down, you're focusing on one thing by not focusing on one thing, which is on like a whole nother level of like what I was talking about, which I love, because you never fail to come up with, you know, you always have something on like a whole different level to say. I love talking with you because I love that. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that. And also, it's like totally cool to work on one thing and everything, but like when you're working on just one thing, I truthfully, I can't get off the idea that you need other things to fuel you. And like I was just watching a video of Rachel Hollis the other day, because I really like her. And this is what actually triggered me to write it down, because I got so angry that I saw it in yet another self-help video. I was just like, oh my God, I can't anymore. I have to branch off on this topic. So she was saying that, she said, she was telling the audience, she's like, you guys, seriously, I can't, you know, tell you enough very serious about it. I can't tell you enough that you have to work on one thing. And I'm pretty sure I honestly paused the video, and then I was like, and then I listened to it maybe 5 days later, like a week later, and I watched the rest of it. And she said, she was like, okay, well, she was pretending to be her audience. She was like, well, Rachel, are you telling me that I can't work out while I'm working on my book or something like that? Just, for instance. And she goes, that's not what I'm saying. And I don't quite remember the rest, but it's like, okay, well, if that's not what you're saying, then it's probably not what you should be preaching, because it's not. And I can guarantee that as Rachel was doing all of that, she was still caring for her kids. She was still maybe wanting to eat healthy. She was still working on her book. She was still doing other things, which means, all in all, that she was not working on one thing. And I think that by telling people this, it really just, I just really think it's not healthy for their mind. I mean, they're like, well, if one of the biggest, richest, happiest, most awesome New York Times best-selling authors say that I have to work on one thing, then I'm going to work on one thing. And then it could possibly, mess them up. So, I mean, for those of you watching this right now, if y'all are looking for, that answer as to why it might not be working for you, you should probably work on a bit more. I mean, have you ever had a time in your life when you were legitimately working on one thing? Like one thing?
Of course not.
Yes. I love it.
So some of the ideas that come to mind as you were talking just now is the value of cross-disciplinary thought, and one other thing, the danger of, no pun intended, one other thing, the danger of self-help advice that is oversimplified and not really fleshed out enough. Because you're exactly right. Like, people will see a guru say, oh, you got to work hard. You got to never give up. And then so somebody's running this failing business, and they're like, well, the guru said never give up. It's like 10 years in a row with in the red, negative numbers, but that can be solved by the show The Prophet with Marcus Lemonis, which is one of my new favorite shows. But anyways, it's a business show. I want to say what I was thinking about the cross-disciplinary stuff, because I remember I took this anatomy physiology class in college, and it was taught by this retired family physician, right? This old Indian guy, this old Indian dude. He used to be a doctor, and fly trying to get into my protein shake, closing this thing up. So this dude was very intellectual, right? And he was, and he said, what is your specialty? And I told him that I already had a degree in psychology. This is after I graduated. I took more classes just out of personal interest. And he said, oh, that's fantastic. And that's my Indian accent there. And then and then he goes, and then he goes, you know why that's fantastic? I said, why? And he said, because for every bachelor's degree, it's very rare, but there are some people out there that have 10 bachelor's degrees, or 5 master's degrees. And he explained that to get each additional degree is progressively less and less time required. The reason is that you study one discipline, you learn the way that it works. You kind of organize knowledge in certain ways. Then you go to the next discipline. First of all, you know how to learn better. And then second of all, you have all of this previous framework for an entire discipline. You you just fill in different content. So for example, right now, what I'm really excited about when it comes to mind coaching is taking these two different topics, physics and psychology, which seem different. However, I studied physics a lot in high school because I was getting ready to be an engineering major. Look how that turned out. And then, so physics, I have all of these concepts, like actually like not just words memorized, but I actually understand concepts, right? Like inertia and net force and Newton's laws Newton's laws, right? Like object in motion will stay in motion unless a force, like we've all heard these laws of Newton's laws of motion, right? And I know how to diagram forces. I know how to calculate like acceleration just by calculating the net force on an object, you know, and its mass, right? Imagine if that can be applied to psychology, because now I spend my days watching these people at work that, or my coworkers, right? Even myself, I'm watching the whole ecosystem, and I'm looking at this entire ecosystem in the office as this set of billiard balls that, you know, bounce off each other and, right, go into the pockets. That can be, everything can be calculated out mechanically, and it's like based on the angle that the, you know, the pool or the billiard ball hits the other billiard ball and the mass of it and the momentum, and then boom, reaction. Now, what if we could diagram a bunch of business executives go into a meeting and they start sharing ideas and bouncing ideas off of each other, right? And if we could calculate the net force, the net energy output, because there's these laws of law of conservation of energy, things like that, right? There's these laws of thermodynamics, energy of a system, adding energy into a system, energy can or cannot be removed from a closed system versus an open system, blah, 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 right? This is the future, is where we're going to take these multiple disciplines that we're supposed to only focus on one of them or pick one, but we're going to take these multiple disciplines and it's going to meld together. That's what I think is going to happen.
Okay, so I have two things here. So are you saying that within, because before you were comparing the billiard balls to all the people in the office, but are you comparing that to billiard balls inside of a human with all of the different things that they're working on, which is why it would be good to work on more than one thing? Is that what you were saying?
Well, I mean, I think you can use both as examples. I was referring to, I was comparing, well, the video got a little lagged there. I was comparing billiard balls to executives in a meeting, right?
Mm-hmm. Got that one.
But you're right. Like you could think about your own mind and all of the different things that are occupying your mind, and you can think of those ideas as objects and how those objects will relate to each other and which one has more of a gravitational force to it. And see, this gets into this, that's why this whole concept of momentum can be transferred from the discipline of physics to the discipline of psychology, because we were just talking about momentum a few minutes ago, where you finish a meeting and you want to take action on the items from that meeting, where there's this momentum to your psychic energy. You know what I mean?
I love it. Oh my God, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it so much. Which brings me to my second thing. The second topic that would be super cool to add to this is the nightmare. Because like I was speaking about earlier, when you're living life in your momentum, so like say the guys in your office and they're living life on this momentum, right? But then say they wake up from their bad dream, they're in so much momentum that they're almost scared to wake up from the dream. They're like, I woke up from my bad dream, I'm gonna go back in it because that's scary and I'm in too much momentum to just halt, to just come to a halt, which brings back, I don't know what the word for a halt, I don't know if that's inertia, I don't know what it is, but brings you to that halt, which would correlate to physics. And you come to this halt and then you're sort of like, what do I do now? I've just been living my life in this bad dream, and now I'm awake and I don't know what to do. So it goes back to sleep. Tell me what you think on that.
Well, yeah. So I had a bit of context because we discussed this, earlier before the call. So, but if I understand correctly, um, so you're identifying this phenomenon of the nightmares, where when a person wakes up from a nightmare, once they can identify it as a nightmare or it was just a dream, that allows them to, is that the halt you were talking about, where it allows them to?
No,
Can you clarify?
that was the one when you're awake. That's the one when you're awake, but the one when you're sleeping is slightly different because you're like asleep and you wake up, you open your eyes to your real life. Still don't know which one is real yet. But you wake up from your dream and you're like, oh, thank heavens, it was a bad dream, right? But because we're so used to this being our real life, your subconscious, we know that that was a dream. But in real life, when you're waking up, like say mentally, I had this belief in my head, that I'm unwanted and I'm going to do all of these things in my life to make sure that I am unwanted. And then all of a sudden, in your real life, you wake up from that dream, and that's when you come to the halt. But you've already been in so much unconscious momentum during that bad dream, that those horrible happenings for you, you go home at night and you're like, can't believe I'm so unwanted, and you go home, and then once you wake up from that and you realize that you were the one creating that because you now have come into some information that will allow you to change it, that's when you come to a halt. And you're like, well, that couldn't have been me. And I'm going to go back into it.
Okay, gotcha. So that brought to mind, some ideas of, well, some questions, right? Some questions we could discuss, like how, like what's the catalyst or what triggers a transformation? One thing that I like about the way you view the world, or the way you see things, is you often identify, or you can see when people have self-limiting beliefs, right? That's a big part of your mind coaching, right? So
yeah.
And self-limiting beliefs are they're so insidious because they're so sneaky. They just like they're like a parasite that they they like get onto you and you don't know it's there, but they're holding you back from like thriving. So essentially you're the host, and once again we are melding disciplines here because parasite-host relationship is a concept of biology, which we are now applying to psychology. So the self-limiting belief is the parasite of the human being, of the mind, right? So it latches onto us, and it takes, which is the definition of a parasite. Symbiotic relationship would be like when you have those fish that hide, or the fish that go inside the whale's mouth, and then they like eat the plaque off of the whale's teeth or whatever. So they like benefit the whale because they clean the teeth of the whale. And then in turn, their benefit is they get like safety in the whale's teeth, or they get transported. The whale like transports them to a different part of the ocean or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so it's a win-win for both organisms. But when it comes to human being and that human being's self-limiting beliefs, that is not a win-win relationship. That is a win-lose relationship, where the self-limiting belief will tear down the human being every single time, just like a parasite and a coronavirus will tear people down. So all right, now that being said, now where that was a little bit of a down a branch, so now I need to walk back towards the trunk of the tree and then see where I want, what other branch I wanted to go down. What was the question I was going to answer?
The trigger.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think it was triggers of somebody waking up.
Oh, yes, yes. We were talking about the yes, this waking up phenomenon, the nightmare stuff. Um, so how does someone? Yeah. So if we think of the self-limiting belief, the example that you used was what was the example? I'm a horrible person.
I am unwanted.
I'm unwanted, right? So if someone is going around carrying this belief with them, and somehow this person starts to detach from the belief, or they find evidence against it, and they kind of distance from this belief, we have to understand that process. We have to understand what's going on in a very detailed way, right? Like how does that happen, and can we represent that the same way we would represent inertia, like a rolling boulder coming to a stop and losing its momentum, um, or would it be like a person, or would it be like a person going to the moon where the gravity force is smaller, so the person, when they jump, they can jump higher on the moon versus on Earth because of this. So maybe getting rid of a self-limiting belief is kind of like that, where it's this, you change the amount of force that's tying the person down psychologically, right? So it's almost like
Yes.
getting rid of that force, or lowering that force, or weakening that force, which then in turn allows the person to grow, I guess you would say, for lack of a better term, to grow as a person, to grow as a spirit, whatever. Um, but yeah, I haven't thought a lot about that, but I'm really glad you brought that up, because now the gears are turning. So yeah, I'll pass it.
Definitely interesting. I like I don't know if it's an analogy. I think it might be, but the analogy of on the moon, because you can now, due to the lack of gravity holding you down to the ground, you can now jump higher. And I love that, because once again, it's on a completely different level than the rolling ball, but it's also very, very good, because it's almost like a result of the rolling ball, and it's like the rolling ball's soul comes out. But so it's like when you wake up, it's like that rolling ball, and it's going down a hill, and all of a sudden a block stops it, and it stops it in its path. And obviously the rolling ball cannot remove the block and go back to sleep, per se, like a human could if they were automatically brought to a halt from their rolling ball thoughts of I'm unwanted. And that moment when in Eckhart Tolle's, Eckhart Tolle, but in his book, The Power of Now, he states that, oh my gosh, where did the thought just go? So it's when you're in so much suffering, like you're in so much suffering, eventually you're going to be forced to wake up. So even if you have unconscious thoughts of this can't be, I know that I'm wanted, sort of thing. Like, I know that I'm wanted. I know myself. I'm super cool. I'm wanted. And wherever those thoughts of I am unwanted came from, you now have the correct information to put inside you and to believe that will stop you from the momentum of I am unwanted. And that's when I think it sort of hits you. It's like when you're reading a book, you're already a very smart human. You already know so super much. But when you're reading a book and all of a sudden new information hits you, it's like, whoa, it's like a whole new world, and you're woken up from it. And sometimes it's super easy to go back to sleep. And sometimes you might not even know when you go back to sleep, because that parasite is there and you just kind of, you get the information, you're like, I'm awake from the bad dream, and then it's like, I'm going to go back to sleep, because that parasite is still there. And sometimes it may take a little time to implement it, aka planting a seed, in order for that parasite to just fully extract itself from your body. You'd be just pushing out the parasite day by day by day as you gather evidence and you grow that seed. So that's pretty much waking up from the bad dream in your life. You just slowly wake up from it. It's actually almost like having a horrible dream. Have you ever had a freaking dream so damn scary and it takes you maybe a little bit to wake up from it? Because I know I have. Like sometimes I'll wake up from a super bad dream and I'll just be like, dude, was that real? Like, I feel like I can still feel being stabbed in the heart 5 times. So it's pretty much like that. Like, you can still feel it, but slowly you wake up. That's my view on it.
Yeah, I think I can relate. I had dreams where, I was like running from something, and then even though I wake up, my body still feels the stress of it, of the imagined event. But I think even though the event was kind of imagined, it was at the same time it was simulated by the body. Like certain chemicals were released, stress hormones and whatnot, and adrenaline, and so for the heartbeat, like if you wake up from a bad dream and your heart is beating fast, it's not going to slow down the minute you realize it was just a dream. It'll slow down gradually, right? So the body, right? So the body still carries like this residue of it, right? But that even blurs the line of where do you delineate between the body and the spirit, or the body and the mind, or right? We clearly can't oversimplify and say that they don't interact with each other, because they do. There's tons of research on the mind-body connection and how you can even heal yourself by imagining your body healing, right? So I mean, that's not my area of expertise, but I know of people who study that, right? And I think that what's trippy, what I can say for sure, like what I know from studying and working in psychology, is that the images that are in your mind do affect your body. I mean, it's nothing complex or complicated. It's just the same idea as like meditation. When people, listen to these YouTube meditations of close your eyes and imagine a gentle stream or a mountainside, right? And people relax and stuff. And so you have to, that's the point of delving into it and looking. Now we have to look at the machinery. Like, how does that happen? Like, is it because of the person's the speaker's very calm voice? Does that induce the relaxation, or is it the imagery of the mountains and the stream? Like, is that it, right? Is it the birds chirping? Is it the auditory, right? The animal sounds? Is that, who knows? But what we can say, like very confidently, is that there are changes, physiological changes going on. And that, again, is a link between like psychology and biology. And at that point, you can't really separate them as disciplines as much. I'm like, okay, this is psychology, this is biology. Because now what's happening? Your biology is changing as you're doing this mental exercise, which is a psychology thing. So, right. So I see that's kind of how I see it happening. I don't know. It looks like you might have a thought.
I love it. I think it's so cool because it's 100% true. You can't just say that this is psychology and this is biology, because they do play such a big role together. Like, it's like when you're watching a movie, like there ain't like It's not starring one person. It's starring psychology and biology and probably even more, you know, maybe even physics, you know, all of that stuff, they all just come together as one. And actually what you were saying about, is it the voice that calms them down? Is it the birds chirping? Is it the pictures in their head? What if it could actually also be the simple act of them doing something that can benefit them? What if it even just calms them down because they're like, yes, I'm going to try this to better myself? What if that's the thing that calms them down? You know?
Yeah, sort of like a self-care thing, or this idea of that I'm doing something for me, or it kind of presupposes value, that it presupposes self-worth if you're going to spend time doing something that benefits your mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. Which gives them like a calm mind about it. And I mean, I think that's just totally awesome, because it's totally true. I mean, like, if you're thinking of, it's kind of like the bad dream, because it's like, if you're okay, so you wake up from a bad dream, and at first you're still replaying those images inside of your mind, which of course is going to cause a little bit of tenseness in your body. It's going to cause your muscles to tense up. But then once you wake up from that bad dream fully, you now have new images inside your head, which is going to give you a different feeling in your body, which is going to, you know, it's going to, all in all, it's going to make you feel a different way once you get those bad images out of your head, which it can probably be really useful in healing trauma, because probably, I mean, if I were to do it, like go back in your mind, think of the trauma that you think you know, that you've experienced, and then take a look at what it makes you feel, and then think of something that you'd like in the future. Maybe a happy family, maybe one of those really cute dogs that looks like a bear. You know, like picture what you'd like, and then see how that makes your body feel as well. And maybe that can give people a little bit more understanding on how to heal their trauma effectively. Because I think that understanding has a lot to do with, so you mentioned understanding, I think, in the video, but understanding, I think, is the key to releasing. Because if you don't understand something, you can't exactly release it, or you can't exactly feel it. Am I right or wrong on that?
If
In your
if you don't understand it, you can't. Or I think, wait, you said if you, once you understand it, then it doesn't have as much power over you.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much, yeah.
I think that's true. I think one time I wrote down that I felt like anger is always a sign of incomplete understanding or lack of understanding. Like when we get angry at people, there's usually something that we don't understand about that other person, which is accounting for that person's behavior or the way they're acting. And since we don't understand that person's situation in life, we get angry at them. That's just one example. So I think that I can think of examples where it's true for me, where once so an event that perhaps you don't understand completely has the potential to be more traumatic for you, right?
Sort of. Yeah, I think so, because it stays stuck in your brain, and which causes trauma in the body, I think.
Yeah, I think that I think that's true. I think that I'm not the expert on trauma, to be sure. I know who the expert is. It's this guy named Bessel van der Kolk, and forgot what country he's from though. Europe, I'm pretty sure. But he's kind of like the world's expert on trauma, and he's written a few books, one of which I want to read. It's called The Body Keeps the Score, or something to that effect.
Oh, heard that.
Yeah, so very, very interesting, right? Because body keeps the score. I think it speaks to this, again, the integration of biology and psychology, where you where you a past negative trauma is triggered by something going on right now. You know, your past memory is triggered, and the body goes through these reactions that it went through in that past trauma. And so part of unpuzzling this thing is understanding the body, right? Just as much as we need to understand the mind. So again, there's this like I said, an integration between mind and body there. And I did want to, before we wrap up, I want to mention again, like one thing that you made me think of through what you were sharing is the movie The Matrix. I don't know if you were going for that or not, but The Matrix, you haven't seen it, or you have? No? Oh, it's a classic. Yeah. At first, I thought it was weird, like because I'm not really into sci-fi stuff that much, but it's very philosophical. So, I mean, it raises the question of this: how do we know what reality is? How do we know that we're not just plugged into some computer game right now and we're like characters in somebody's computer game or whatever, right? It's like, or it's the same idea as like, how do you know that you're not dreaming right now?
Yeah.
Because you never know that. It's this weird inception thing or whatever, where it's like, it's only until you wake up, that's when you realize that you were in a dream. So, but anyways, I thought it was really cool that how you were mentioning how you were tying together this waking up from dream idea together with self-limiting beliefs and kind of evolving as a person and personal change. If I understood correctly, like these stages of personal change that we might go through can be compared to like waking up, the process of waking up, insofar as when we did have the self-limiting belief, we didn't realize we had it. So it was like we were sleeping. But then once we realize it, then we're in this other world. But then once we eventually release it, then we're in a completely new world. However, who's to say that you still don't have some other self-limiting belief about some other part of yourself? So then you're going to have to get rid of that one. But then, so the finish line, it never really exists, in my opinion, when it comes to self-help. It's a never-ending process of improvement. And I mean, unless they come up with some way to scan your mind and count the number of self-limiting beliefs, because then you could theoretically reach a point where the number is zero. You have zero self-limiting beliefs, but that just seems a little bit of a stretch for me. I don't know about you.
It seems a bit like a far stretch for me too. But really quick, because you did say that we're going to wrap up, I want to talk about anger, because I love anger, because I used to be like such an angry child. So I wanted to get your opinion on this before you go. I used to be such an angry child. Like, oh my God, Robert, you should have seen me in the hallways. Like, I just was angry. I did not like anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I hated school. I just, oh my God, I couldn't stand it. There were so many things about my life that I hated. And eventually, the older that I grew and the more into self-help I dove, and the older that I got, the more that I wanted to better myself, I realized that all of the things that I hated were just things that I was extremely passionate about changing about my life or about the world. So I view anger as passion, but then I also see your side on not understanding something as well could be anger, because I've also heard that before. I just personally, I never correlated with it, because I understood my anger as passion. And like today, like I can still get angry, but I'll find the underlying reason for it and realize that it's just a passion that I'm passionate about the world for. So like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think for sure there's two ways you could look at anger, or you could use it in two ways, right? One is maybe at certain times it's a little bit more like useless, or it's more it's kind of more harmful to your self-growth. But then I think there are times where it can be used as fuel. It can be used as motivation. It can be used to spur self-growth. And then what would need to be answered, and maybe in future conversations we can delve into this. I think what needs to be answered is what determines whether anger goes this way or that way. And is it different types of anger? I mean, right now, a lot of people are angry about racial injustice. You know, it's June 22nd, 2020. So anybody who knows this time period knows the current events of this time. You know, a lot of people are angry about racial injustice and inequality. And that can kind of, well, maybe this is how it ties in to what we talked about today. Like, you know, like Newton said, an object at rest will stay at rest unless acted on by a net force, right? So a social hierarchy, which favors certain groups over others, is going to remain the same unless acted on with the sufficient force, right? And that force sometimes might originate through anger, right? But some sort of force. And now here we're not talking about objects. We're not talking about force of gravity, you know, and mass. We're talking about concepts of the human being and human systems, such as societies. So now we're going to need a new set of vocabulary and concepts. It might be parallel to mechanics, the mechanics branch of physics, but it's going to be a new set of vocabulary and concepts. So then the question would be, if there's a way to even diagram what's going on in today's society and these parades and the Juneteenth and all of the psychic energy right now that is swirling on this planet around this topic, how can that be quantified the same way you can quantify something like the hole in the ozone layer, or the, you know what I mean? These more, what people would identify as more scientific, you know, global warming, you know, and measuring the temperature. How about the global warming of our society and its anger? How about the warming of people's like awareness of social injustice and that sort of a thing? You know what I mean? We kind of need a whole new set of concepts to understand, to make sense of psychology in a way that's going to help us.
Agreed, for sure. Yeah, I mean, do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think we
or do we have some more time?
Well, I think we should probably wrap it up for today. I think we covered a lot of topics, and we'll have we even started a few threads for next time. So if so for those who are watching this video, if you have any requests for topics or questions that you'd like to have us discuss, then type them in the comments below, and we can certainly do a conversation on it in the near future. Any final thoughts or comments, Kyra?
No, but I think well, I guess yes. The last thought is just, it's great speaking with you on here, because I've got my thoughts, and then you've got your thoughts, and they're so alike, but yet they're so different in nature. And I love it. I love the way that they can still come together, because I feel like it's like the choose, look at one thing. It works for some people, and focusing on more than one thing works for some people. So some people can be on your level and understand your level more, and some people can be on my level and understand my level more. And then they can look at them together and be like, whoa, like that's sick. So I love that. I love the way that both of our minds work together. It's so good.
Really, lots of synergy every time. So look forward to the next one. I'm going to stop the recording at this point. Thank you all for watching.
Okay.